Now I'd like to introduce Marianne King with Trout Unlimited.
Thanks, Lisa. Good morning. So my name is Marianne King. I've been with TU for about 6 years. And when I first started, one of my first tasks was to go out into one of the watersheds we were working in. And we were trying to set up some monitoring and ask a landowner if we could install a streamflow gauge on our property. And so I went out with one of my colleagues. We parked our car. We walked up our driveway. And literally, as we're introducing ourselves, we hear this kind of strange noise. And we look up, and a black helicopter is coming up over the horizon. And so I was mortified, right? Here I am, already slightly uneasy about asking a landowner to put a gauge with public information on their property, and this black helicopter is coming up over the horizon. I was like, oh no, I hope she doesn't interpret this as a sign of things to come. And it turned out okay. She ended up allowing us to put the gauge on her property, and actually now she hosts the internet connection for an antenna that also brings information from other gauges in the watershed. And the black helicopter was there to find a homeless guy that had snuck into the neighboring wine estate to have a couple glasses of wine and put on a few bathrobes and wander around. So it worked out. But the memory sort of stuck with me because I think it's representative in a way of the kind of unease that all of us, landowners and also organizations interested in putting water back in stream kind of have in talking about this type of work that touches on water use and fish and water rights and permitting and things that have traditionally been kind of hard. And so I wanted to use my opportunity today to talk about a few examples and case studies where a few pioneering landowners and organizations have sort of done it, and I think are demonstrating how it can work to the benefit of fish and also coastal communities and economies. Oop, there goes my paper. Okay, so next slide. I'm just going to go quickly through these. It's no secret that in some streams, low stream flow, naturally occurring, plus the cumulative effects of multiple water diversions can be a limiting factor for salmonids and other species in coastal streams. And just on the left, this is one of the streams I work in. It's pretty tiny. It's like 3 square mile watershed, but it's got some dry reaches. And then on the right, it's a graphic I put together. It's just taken from the same place over the course of a year. And it shouldn't surprise me anymore, but it's still shocking, the difference between August and the middle of February, how different the stream is. It's also no secret that, oh, you have to click again. Yeah. It's also no secret that the lack of water availability can be a stressor on human communities. And next. So there's a number of programs across the western United States that have developed to address low stream flow and tried to reconnect streams by restoring that stream flow. So I wanted to highlight a few from coastal California streams, and also just a note that for some of these, the organization I work for, Trout Unlimited, we've been directly involved, and in others, I'm talking about other people's work. So the experts might be sitting in the room, but it may not be me. So I'll try to answer what I can and maybe direct you to others if I can't. So my purpose is to really introduce some of the approaches and also sort of working off the hypotheses that a lot of these approaches can be used elsewhere. Maybe just get you to think about how some of this might apply in the watersheds that you work in and how some of this could be scaled up, out, franchised, technologically transferred, whatever you're comfortable with in terms of terminology. And I also wanted to note that for a lot of these projects, these are streams with landowners that don't rely on a water district or an irrigation district to supply their water. So for most of these, it's an individual figuring out how to get their own water supply. So next. The first few case studies I'll talk about have to do with storage and seasonal storage in particular. So these are tiny projects that attempt to capture water during the winter when it's sort of orders of magnitude more plentiful than during the dry season, and then use it for dry season use. And I also just wanted to note here that traditionally we have sort of systems in place that discourage some of this seasonal use, things like riparian doctrine, which it's easier to use a riparian right oftentimes than to attain appropriative water right. So a lot of the projects I talk about have sort of an infrastructure component, but also a water rights or water management component that goes with it, and that's often harder. So the first is tanks, and sanctuary forest. Is Tasha here? Hi, Tasha. Sanctuary Forest has really been a pioneer in this regard. They work up in the Mattole River and the headwaters. And Sanctuary Forest pioneered a residential program, which in a nutshell works with residential users who rely on riparian water use. And then they installed tanks that allow the water users to pull water in the winter and then use that water during the dry season. And so the water users refrain from using that water in the dry season, and then they've got periods of rotation sort of on the shoulder seasons, and then periods of forbearance during the driest part of the year, and that's when that winter water is used. TU recently worked with Sanctuary Forest and Whitethorn School to install 80,000 gallons of storage in the Mattole headwaters with a similar purpose, but a slightly more complex permitting regime. And the idea there is that the storage of water pumped from the creek would then be used during the critical dry season, and that water would be returned to the fish. So this is a similar concept, but rather than talking about potable uses, we're talking about non-potable uses and harvesting rainwater from roofs. And just a couple examples, Salmon Creek and Churro Creek. Salmon Creek is in Sonoma County, and Churro Creek is San Luis Obispo County. Moving out of the North Coast for just a second. So in Churro Creek, there was a cooperative project between Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, Morro Bay National Estuary Program, the Seas, Fortuna, NOAA Restoration Center, and the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and I think probably a list of others. And they installed 4 74,000-gallon tanks. They're capturing water off roofs of shade structures, student residences, labs, and classrooms. And then the water is being used by a cattle operation that they call the Beef Center. And then in Salmon Creek, this is a Goldridge RCD. I don't know if Brittany's still here or not. I guess not. Occidental Arts and Ecology Center and NOAA Restoration Center and many others. They installed 9 systems in Salmon Creek. The goal was to reduce diversions from Salmon Creek itself, and then indirectly, some of the water users rely on water from Bodega Water Company, and so by reducing their use of Bodega Water Company water, Bodega Water Company then had to divert less from Salmon Creek. And so here they had a 35,000-gallon system for the fire department, tanks for residential users ranging from 9,000 to 39,000 gallons, and they actually constructed a large underground tank system for a ranching operation. I think it was 250,000 gallons. So just a couple examples of storage of rainwater. Occidental Arts and Ecology Center, Brock Dolman, has also done a ton of work to think outside the box. And so how do we use the ground, our biggest storage tank, and slow spread and sink water, and think about groundwater recharge as well. Next. So off-stream ponds, they can also function as sort of an open-air storage tank in a way. And there's a few examples. You may have heard of the Pine Gulch Creek case study, which is in Marin. It hasn't actually been constructed yet, but they did move through the water rights permitting process. And it's also been employed in the Russian River. There was a grower who was able to obtain some funding from NRCS and had a streamside well, built an off-stream pond, and then discontinued using the streamside well for irrigation, and now uses basically a source switch. So he diverts from percolating groundwater, and then the pond fills both with rainwater and percolating groundwater, so he's not actually using that well for any irrigation in the summer anymore, which has helped the creek quite a bit. It's also been used for frost protection. You can go ahead. So you may have heard frost protection has been a pretty contentious issue. I work a lot in the Russian River. And this is because the high rates of diversion needed for sprinklers as opposed to drip irrigation can be really problematic at an individual level, but especially when you're talking about cumulative effects, which is what happens when the temperature drops and multiple people in the same area need to divert at the same time. And so a number of growers have decided, without any regulation, to just go ahead and do some projects that would help the creek and also help them continue to frost protect. And so one of the examples is a frost fan. We worked with a grower who had a small on-stream dam that isn't a picture of it, but that's a good example of an on-stream flashboard dam. And so he pulled up some water, and then he would divert for frost protection from behind that. And we worked with the grower to figure out that a frost fan, which is actually on the left there, would work for his parcel, would allow him to continue to frost protect, and then basically got him off stream and discontinued use of that on-stream flashboard dam. And if you're not familiar with how they work, it's kind of like back to the helicopter. A helicopter blade, and it rotates, but then it also spins, and so it covers about a 10-acre parcel. We also worked with another grower to do a source switch. So we helped him construct an off-stream pond, and then he's filling that using groundwater as opposed to from an on-stream dam. And then this is a little bit more in your backyard. Marilyn mentioned Sari Sommerstrom from the Scott River Water Trust, who's first water trust in California, I think maybe still the only, and she's done a ton for leasing. It happens throughout the West, but hasn't happened much in California, and so she's a good resource for folks that might be interested in that. I think right now she's really focused on short-term leases. And then also, Lisa mentioned TNC's work. I just wanted to highlight that in part because I think that there's a lot of opportunity for land trusts who think about land purchases to also think about where water rights might fit into those transactions. And what TNC has done is submit some petitions to change the water rights they have to dedicate them in stream. Okay, real quick, nod to water conservation. I think for us, this has oftentimes fit into other projects. So if you're thinking about storage, you want to reduce the amount of water that someone might be using if you have an opportunity to before you think about paying for storing that water. But there's a lot of opportunities: pump efficiency, reducing rates of diversion, thinking about how much a crop needs. In one case, we're working with a camp that just over-irrigates some lawn. We can keep going. And then I just wanted to note that there are different tools that may apply for different types of projects. Sanctuary Forest has a great document called Legal Options for Streamflow Protection that I'd recommend you read. And some folks have used the Water Code, Section 1707, which allows for in-stream dedications to actually dedicate water back in stream. Other folks have used forbearance agreements, which are like a conservation easement on water, or a covenant that runs with the land. And in some cases, folks are using both. So you could use Section 1707 to either change the purpose of a water right, or you could add a purpose of use. And so you can add in-stream flow to that, and then use a forbearance agreement to basically govern when it's used for in-stream flow versus a consumptive use, which I think is kind of an interesting wrinkle. So I'm gonna skip over this, and if we have time in the Q&A, maybe we can chat a little bit more about just some observations I had. So you can keep going. In some, I think we've seen an expansion in the use of in-stream flow, restoration and reconnection in the past few years, an expansion in tools and an expansion in geography. And I've mentioned a few programs that I'm aware of. I'm sure there are others. I know SRF's been working in, I think, Redwood Creek, and so I'd encourage you to pipe up if you've got something that's cool and should be mentioned. And I guess that my hope is that incorporating these types of strategies just becomes, a normal part of developing land or changing land or living in a coastal stream system. I also hope that we get to the point where no one person will be able to summarize all the coastal streamflow projects that are happening in California in one presentation. So thanks a lot for your time. And I've got a few resources on that last slide if you want to jot them down. Thanks very much.